Hey guys, Indie Explorer here. Of all the many captivating characters in Ender Lilies, arguably none are as important to the course of the game, barring the White Priestesses, than Ferin, the Umbral Knight. He's the reg to Lilies' Rico, a mysterious relic from a different age who protects and guides her deep into the ruins of an abyss on their journey to the bottom of the Netherworld, a dangerous place of horrific experimentation where they hope to find her mother Fredia, and perhaps find a way to lift the curse that hangs over the land. Also, white flowers are a thing. Any way you look at it, the Umbral Knight is an integral part of Ender Lilies, and today we take a deeper look into his character and follow his story before and during the events of the game. We know virtually nothing about Ferin's origin and background as it pertains to his youth, save for the fact he may have been raised in the Western Desert based on his comment that he prefers warmer climates than Land's End, but even that's pretty speculative. Regardless, his story as we know it begins in Eldred's memory at the tail end of the war between colonists and ancients. With the ancients having been forced deep into the Verboten domain by the relentless invaders and nearly all of their number slaughtered, hope found a way in the most hallowed of locations, the Deathless Pact ritual chamber at the heart of the abyss. The last adult priestess, whose name is never revealed, managed to save a single priestess child in the chaos and brought them here for one final ritual, along with her deathless warrior Eldred and the soon-to-be warrior Ferin, who was chosen probably because he was one of the only knights left. But how exactly did this ritual work? I've alluded to the complicated nature of this question in previous videos, but now we're finally going to dig in. Here are the facts we are given about the Deathless Pact. Only high-ranking priestesses are allowed to participate. The last priestess is bonded as an infant. It is a necromantic rite that entreats the souls of the dead. Ferin is still alive when it is performed. The warrior forfeits flesh and becomes a disembodied spirit. Both Ferin and Eldred have physical bodies. The warrior lives on until the bloodline comes to an end, and Eldred remains after the death of his priestess and her bloodline. I think you can see the problem here. For every piece of information we have, there is yet another piece that directly contradicts it. There seems to be an easy explanation for number 8 at least. The priestess must have saved her own daughter, so her bloodline was still ongoing, right? Well, I don't think so. If that were true, then why was Ferin needed at all? Wouldn't she just have assumed Eldred would remain to protect her? Because this is clearly not what happened, we have to assume there was no blood relation between the two priestesses. There is another explanation for what happened, however, one that can unify all of these separate bits of information together, and it all goes back to the fact that Eldred's priestess is the one who performed the ritual. We are very clearly told that only high-ranking, experienced priestesses could perform this ritual, which makes sense considering it was probably a difficult and potentially dangerous spell dealing with human souls, and the Deathless Knight would be bound to the caster. However, in the desperate situation these individuals found themselves in, they had no choice but to enter uncharted territory. The priestess attempted to perform the ritual as an intermediary, linking Ferin and Nymphilia together, sacrificing herself in the process due to the sheer amount of energy this took. Not that she had much left to give, as she was surely already exhausted from countless days of combat. And while the exact mechanics of this ritual are never explained, it would appear that it involved the priestess transferring part of her own soul into the knight, as evidenced by the fact that Eldred's body contains not one, but 2 ancient souls. This meant the priestess had to transfer part of Nymphilia's soul into Ferin as part of the ritual. While it was mostly successful, there were 3 consequences for it being done in this unconventional way. First, Ferin did not die as part of the process. Second, the bond was much weaker than usual. And third, an unintentional residual bond was formed between Eldred and Nymphilia. I'll cover each of those points as we get to them. Following the events in the ritual chamber, Ferin was able to escape with Nymphilia out into the Deadlands, which is probably another name for the hinterland, the latter meaning literally uncharted areas beyond established borders. There they hid among the caves and crags, staying ever out of sight of the colonists who were likely hunting ancient survivors. This continued for a period of time, with Ferin dutifully guarding his young ward until the fateful day that he died deep in a cave. We know this happened since he tells it to Lily in the catacombs, and because it happened, we know that he did not die as part of the ritual earlier. What caused his death is unknown, but a few possibilities are starvation, exposure, or succumbing to old injuries sustained during his escape from the kingdom. Now, what should have happened is that his soul separated from his body and persisted with Nymphilia due to their bond, but because the bond was weaker than normal, his soul was unable to connect and entered a state of limbo. You could think of it like a weak wireless signal. Your device may tell you it's locating a network because it can tell there's a signal, but it never becomes strong enough to actually connect and simply spins forever. Fortunately for Nymphilia, she was found shortly thereafter by the king of the First Age as she wandered out alone in the wilderness, and he decided to bring her back to be raised by the colonists. Based on the vague wording that she was old enough to cling, I think we can infer that she was old enough to walk as well, which means she would have had to be at least 1 year old, though I think she was older than that, since she didn't wander off a cliff or anything. The years passed quickly at this point. Nymphilia grew into a strong woman who fought back blighted forces with the new kingdom and subsequently founded the White Parish, which supplanted the colonists' native religion and led to their ironic worshipping of the last ancient priestess. She would later give birth to a daughter, whom we know only as the Priestess of the Wind, who would in turn give birth to Fredia. Throughout all this time, Ferin continued his restless slumber, still unable to connect to his bonded bloodline. Though it's never stated what caused him to awake, I believe it was the transformation of Fredia into the Blighted Lord shortly before the events of the game. The metaphysical shockwave which emanated from her across the land was so powerful that it kickstarted him back into consciousness, and so he awoke in the cave of his demise 70 years earlier as a deathless spirit, where his only company had been the Gloomglow blossoms. Knowing he had failed to be there for Nymphilia, who is now long gone, he ventured out into the land, tracking the faintest signal of his sworn bloodline, and stumbled upon none other than Lily herself. Whether or not he is responsible for awakening her is unclear, though I suspect she would have awoken even without his arrival. He just made it happen sooner. What he does next is quite interesting. He bonds himself to Lily. We know that he was technically bound to Fredia at this time since he could not leave Land's End without her, so the fact that he is able to bind himself to another shows that the Deathless Knights still had a measure of independence as part of their pact. Following this, the two then set out to follow Fredia's breadcrumb trail, tracing her path slowly but inevitably deeper underground to the Verboten domain. We are later told by the Umbral Knight that he considered killing Lily as they commenced their journey together, which is a fairly shocking revelation, especially since no explanation is given. However, considering the nightmare this man had been through, watching his entire nation and probably family be murdered before his eyes, subsisting as a fugitive in the cold wilderness, and then caught in limbo for 3 generations, it's no wonder he just wanted the pain to end. As a side note though, killing Lily would not have actually released him from the pact since Fredia was still alive, though the Umbral Knight may have not realized that yet. Near the end of their journey, Ferin and Lily come across the old ritual chamber itself in search for the final stone tablet, and it is there Lily finally puts Eldred to rest. Like Ferin, he had been stuck in a state of limbo as well. When his priestess had performed the ritual and initiated the transfer part of Nymphilia's soul to the Umbral Knight, a tiny portion of her own soul was accidentally imparted as well, which meant after she died, Eldred was unable to pass on. Put another way, his bond was tricked into thinking the priestess was still alive, but since of course she was not, his bond was far too weak for him to function. But one question remains. What about his corpse? If he was supposedly a disembodied soul, then what is a physical body doing here? Well, I might have an answer for this, but it'll have to wait until a later video. Finally, at the end of their journey, Lily and Ferin find Fredia in her awful state as the Blighted Lord, and are ultimately able to bring her quietus and release her soul to eternal rest. We know that Lily and Ferin had grown close throughout their journey, and I have to imagine that their bond grew ever stronger after they left Land's End to forge a destiny for themselves elsewhere. Well, that's all for today, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this explanation of the Deathless Pact in the comments below. I would also encourage you to check out my complete lore video if you haven't already done so, since it will help contextualize a lot of this information. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you next time.